welcome to The Loneliness Industry, a podcast where we decode the societal bullshit that parades as wisdom and serves to keep you stuck. Now, if you're listening for the first time, I'm Jordan Rain, philosophy graduate with a severe allergy to self-help gurus. And my own way out of debilitating loneliness began when I realised that the very discourses claiming to solve our problems really just cleverly perpetuate them. Now, if you're already following, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm really glad you are. In this episode, we're going to unpack the next of our foundational Western capitalist values, competition, which is inseparably bound with the comparison game. Now, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, particularly one on individualism and the hero narrative, that one comes up here too a little bit later in the episode, so do go back and listen. And a reminder that each of the values I'm discussing does not hang in isolation. They're part of a broader system of meaning in our culture, and they reinforce and reshape each other, coalescing to what we recognise as good, beneficial, healthy, and, of course, by extension, what we define as bad, harmful, and undesirable. Yep, these values often lie behind things we just automatically assume are good or bad, things we don't tend to analyse on a deeper level to see if they really are doing us any favours. And exactly that is what this podcast is all about. As usual, we'll be doing this in the sections that I like doing. So first of all, what the hell it is, what is competition? And this is usually the part where you think, yeah, I know what it is. And that's exactly the thing. Quite often, when we take something for granted as, yeah, I know what it is, we've just become accustomed to a certain way of thinking about something so that we don't tend to want or think it's necessary to look deeper. And with competition and comparison, we really need to. There is another big reveal in this week's episode as well regarding the foundations of the idea of competition, what it's actually built on to give us faith in it. And as usual, the second part is about why the idea of competition has appeal for us, because, as with anything, we're not gonna embrace it unless there's some kind of at least potential visible payoff. And then the shadow side. I like the shadow side. This focus on the costs of constant comparison and competition with others and how it impacts loneliness and connection. And this week there's an extra section. I'm going to look at some of the things that we can do to mitigate that shadow side and challenge a few of the issues that competition sets us up for. So what to expect this week? Expect to discover how competition doesn't just push us to do better, it quietly scripts our lives like we're starring in a film we didn't even agree to be in and are certainly not being paid for. This episode also unpacks how the race to measure up turns friends into rivals, success into performance, and self-worth into a scoreboard. From office war metaphors to philosophical rabbit holes, we're going to explore how competition sneaks into everything. From your job to your dating life to that voice in your head asking you if you're enough. So, the fundamentals. What is competition? Now, there are several definitions of competition in the Cambridge and Oxford dictionaries, but they revolve around a central idea. A person or group striving to be better or more successful than another person or group. Now, what counts as better or more successful varies, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But the core concept involves this kind of striving with the aim of surpassing others and some kind of measuring stick. And because of all that, there's an implicit notion of hierarchy, of comparing ourselves to determine where we stand in terms of this ranking and status. Because with competition, someone is ahead and someone is behind. But, of course, it's not solely about this ranking and comparison. It involves the effort as well, the striving element, and the context, and the values that define how success is measured and what it even looks like. And it is in that, in how we see success, right, and how we measure it, that things do become less neutral. What counts as success is really influenced by the system that you're in and what that system values. So in capitalism, for instance, profit, productivity, market share are some very common measures of success. In schools, it's pretty obvious, grades, test scores. And in social life, it might be popularity or looks or influence. But the key is our culture's values shape not just what we strive for, but By virtue of how success is defined and measured, it shapes who even gets seen and who gets ignored. Because when we compete towards these narrow, societally defined goals, we don't just embark on a comparison carousel that labels us winners and losers. We reinforce hierarchies and we sideline excellence or talent or whatever in areas that we have become blind to because of the measuring sticks we use. So imagine if for all of us, our entire worth was measured on how fast we can run. Right? Let's say that we'd just boiled our whole existence down to that one measure. We've boiled it down to a limited number, right? But for a thought experiment's sake, I'm a shit runner. I don't know about you. I'm a really shit runner. But I can do other things like, talk a lot about philosophy. But if we were measuring my worth on how fast I could run, I won't even be seen. Yeah, seriously, I'm not something worth observing when it comes to running. So this yardstick running renders me invisible because I'm shit at it, but doesn't see the other things that might be of value. And this is what we do to basically everyone in our society, these measuring sticks we're used to using. If you don't rank on those, you don't get seen at all. And life, it can become this constant exercise in measurement and comparison. And it's a race that we didn't really sign up for, but one that we have to keep running. But yet, we tend to think of competition as natural, as good even. We see it as driving progress. And it's how evolution works, right? Survival of the fittest and all that. I have to bite my tongue because of a spoiler here. Just think about some of the ways that we talk about competition. Okay, so there's healthy competition, like, competition is good for you. Friendly competition, as if it brings us closer somehow. And with fair and open competition, the connotations are that it's a level playing field and that everyone has pretty much a similar chance of winning, depending on how much talent or effort they put in. And quite crucially, we talk about measuring up or not measuring up, making it pretty clear what competition results in, comparing ourselves to one another using that specific kind of yardstick. Now, the effect of constantly comparing ourselves to others is something I'm going to discuss later in this episode. But for now, it's helpful to note that these ways of talking about competition as healthy, fair, and even friendly reflect how we tend to see competition when things are running relatively smoothly. However, when scarcity is front and center, or the stakes feel like they're higher somehow, there's a shift in the language. It's as if scarcity and threat and fear of falling behind crank up the volume on aggression. And we start to see competition as something with more teeth, something more fierce. Business settings, they're quite a good illustration of this, actually. Now, I don't know how many of you have worked for multinational firms, but I had the eye-opening experience of doing so for a while back in the 90s as an internet developer. And I can tell you one thing, right? Business loves two kinds of metaphors. The first and most popular was sports metaphors. And I got to the stage that if anyone else started saying win the business or level playing field or be a team player, I would have purchased a baseball bat to show them just how dangerous sports can actually be. And actually, if you guys have had similar experiences, please write down the sports metaphors that you heard at work into the comments under the video. I'd be really interested to see what they are. And in any case, this place that I work for, I won't say where it was because, they're a multinational company and they might sue me when I get to later bits of this. They loved framing almost everything as a sports game. And here's the interesting thing about sports. I won't lie, I'm not interested in sports, but this thing interests me about sports. It is kind of like a purified form of competition. It's the quintessence of competition. Competing is really all that's going on. It's like the motivation and the action all at once. And what I mean by that is there's no deep moral questions to be asked when we're looking at who can shoot the most goals, right? That's what I mean by it. It's pure competition. No moral stuff is going on that would be of any interest. Sports is morally neutral, or at least we pretty much see it that way. Now, when businesses use sports metaphors, they're kind of suggesting that they're similarly neutral. And when they do takeovers or downsizing or sack people that have been working for them for decades, there are no moral questions to be asked, because this is just about remaining competitive and having a competitive edge, and this is just the rules of the game. And what I mean by this is the way that businesses use sports metaphors tells us something about what they're doing in a sort of broader context, distracting from moral questions before they can even come up, like glossing over the human impact of what they might cause. And in the case of the one I worked for, they were accused, and I don't know if they were found guilty of this, but they were accused of shooting actual real people who were protecting an oil reserve which had oil that they wanted to sell. That's not a sport. In fact, it was a lot more like the second kind of metaphor that this particular multinational liked to use. When the stakes got higher, other underlying drives became apparent, and not just through actions, through the language. The language would cross this line from friendly play into quite warlike terminology. It was like scarcity or threat or fear of falling behind. They cranked up the volume on aggression, and I heard sentences like this: to crush, slaughter, or eliminate the competition, to dominate the market, we've all heard that one, to shoot down ideas, and to go in for the kill. In the case of the place I was working for, it wasn't a metaphor. But let's stick to some of them being metaphors, at least a lot of the time, I hope. Certainly, using language like this on a regular basis, it serves to normalize stress and urgency and even conflict. It makes all of those things expected features of professional life. And I'll be really interested, again, if you guys remember the war metaphors, or just be aware of them if you work in that kind of firm for the next little week, and please write them in the comments. I'd be really interested in the sports metaphors and the war metaphors that you hear in the workplace. And the point is that even these so-called neutral phrases or metaphoric phrases, they show us how competition frames our perception of certain activities. Along with the normalizing of conflict, stress, and urgency, domination comes to be seen as excellence, and undermining others. And if you outmaneuver somebody, moral questions are not asked. It's simply proof that you are more fit in a competitive sense. And we've really come to see competition as just part of the big old game of life, right? But the repercussions are worth considering, and they're as follows. We don't have to think about the people being pushed out, bought out, burned out. We don't have to worry about those who've drawn the conclusion that they can't measure up on any level and hide away in shame on their own for fear of hearing yet again that they aren't good enough. Framing things as competition does encourage us to think that those who can't cut it are weak or losers or just not up to it, even if those people are ourselves. And let's be honest, this game of life, it's not one you can refuse to opt into. It's not optional. You can't show up at work and say, I'm just going to sit this one out, I'm not here to compete. It's baked into how we organise everything: work, school, culture. It even influences areas like the search for companionship. I met this person on online dating who said he didn't want to date a particular person because he was out of her league. And this is something that I had not heard before. Maybe you guys have. Maybe it has become normalized. But essentially this guy was saying he didn't want to date somebody because of a bunch of measuring sticks. He was better than her. And I just thought, okay, you're not a nice person. But yeah, and something we will talk a lot more about later in this episode is that unlike sports, a lot of the competition in our lives is not a fair match. There aren't just two teams or two people on the same level, well matched, striving to be just the fastest, strongest, best, or whatever. All of this competition takes place within the context of power structures that dress up this so-called game as if it was a meritocracy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So to summarize what we think competition is, we tend to think of competition as natural, as fair, and even as healthy, a kind of motivational tool that pushes us to do our best. Wrapped up in phrases like friendly competition or level playing field, it sounds like sports, balanced, fun, maybe even noble, and certainly nothing to get all morally inquisitive about. Yet, beneath that language is a deeper reality. Competition isn't neutral or optional. It's a cultural script shaped by specific values, especially in capitalist systems. It tells us what success looks like, how to measure it, who gets to win and who's excluded. It teaches us to compare ourselves to others with a measuring stick that is not of our making. It pits us against each other, dividing us into units that are trying to outdo other units, and ranks us in order of bestness on its own terms, whilst labelling it empowerment. So in terms of loneliness and our disconnection from one another, competition is a serious factor. We are not in this together with competition. We're being ranked and compared against each other. And we'll go into this more deeply in the section on the shadow side, but for now, let's move on to why we love the idea of competition, or at least find it very hard to let go of. Let's be generous for a minute, okay? There is something deeply compelling about winning, at least for some people, right? For those people, it can act as a driver and a motivation. And even beyond winning, the prospect of it can be seen as about energy, focus, growth, and the sense of becoming more than who you were before. Some of you will say, I'm not trying to beat anyone. I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday. And fair enough. There's something noble in that, at least on the surface. Competition framed in this way is about pushing limits, testing your edge, and it too can feel exhilarating, purposeful, and even alive. It can give structure to ambition. It can give you a goal to reach for, and a clear measure of your progress. It gives you a way to measure your worth. Those numbers, when we have one that sets us firmly in the definitional area of good, can keep the self-doubt at bay. And in a world of uncertainty, there's comfort in knowing what the rules are, even when they're hard, and that you're doing things well. There's a very understandable charm to knowing that you are definitely, according to official measures, okay, or even good, or excellent. And for many people, especially those who are raised to equate worth with performance, and that's a lot of people, competition can become a way to feel seen, a way to feel real. There is a clarity to competition that is deeply appealing. You know where you stand. You either made the team or you did not. You won or you lost. It simplifies the complexity of life into like a legible scoreboard, and there's no need to ask who you are. It is a lot easier to have that number, to say who you are. It can become a sort of a just add water approach to identity. And yes, underpinning a lot of this is the worrying fact that the appeal of competition tends to be its ability to massage our ego, where some might be happy with knowing that a certain number certifies that they're okay or healthy. Many move into that territory where it is only via being better than others at something that they feel validation and self-worth. In a world that often bases value on how we compare to others, whether in beauty, intelligence, success, whatever, being better than can be a kind of victory. It's an easy way to boost our self-esteem, even if it's based on arbitrary or shallow standards that we didn't get to set ourselves. It's like when all else gives way and your carefully built up self-esteem collapses, knowing that you sold more of whatever it is you're selling for your firm that month can actually be the very thing that stops you offing yourself. We're now going to go more deeply into this constantly comparing thing and how what it actually leads to is feeling inferior rather than superior. This wanting to be better than others, it's not some made-up thing. Alfred Adler, an early psychoanalyst, was really interested in inferiority and superiority complex. And this was like the time of Freud, who was also interested in the theme, but got really sidetracked by calling people anal and insisting that all dreams were metaphors for fucking. Adler, on the other hand, got down to it, arguing that people are driven by a need to overcome feelings of inferiority, often by comparing themselves to others. And through this lens, competition becomes a way to prove that we're not less than, that we're enough. Adler also suggested that Western societies, with their emphasis on individual achievement, easily foster superiority complexes, a kind of emotional armor designed to protect ourselves from what is actually our own deep insecurity and fear of being found lacking. The gap that opens up between that pretend superiority and the inner felt inferiority is not considered healthy by most psychologists. But it is worth noting that Adler himself saw the act of striving, that part of competition, striving for superiority, as potentially going either way. It could be healthy for him, striving for mastery, or unhealthy, of course, dominating others, power plays, those sorts of things. But Adler firmly showed that this drive to make ourselves feel better via comparing ourselves and surpassing others, it's there. Another psychologist who helps us understand why we so love competition is Leon Festinger. He worked on what he called social comparison theory, suggesting that we automatically compare ourselves to others to evaluate our own worth. Now, he actually suggests that this comparing ourselves to others is a fundamental drive, but lots of critics step in here, arguing that, one, that this instinct is hugely amplified by Western capitalist systems, where media and metrics train us to do this constantly. And, of course, he has no control group to see if this is an innate drive in everybody. In any case, the take-home is that, human beings, we do have this thing about superiority, inferiority, and we do have this kind of worry that we're not up to scratch. And the systems around us, like capitalism, will obviously amplify, play on these things to, sometimes sell products, and other times, what we will be talking about later on in the who benefits from all this section. But for now, I want to build on this stuff about comparison and superiority, inferiority complexes into narcissism. Now, as I keep mentioning, this is a topic I am going to do several episodes on in the future, and it has a solid place here because another crucial part of why being better than others holds so much appeal is one that both philosophers and psychologists are increasingly pointing out. Our society as a whole, and in terms of the individuals within it, is becoming ever more narcissistic. Now, you don't have to be a person with full-blown NPD to have narcissistic traits, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. You don't actually have to have that diagnosable thing to have narcissistic traits. And without going into the full detail about what the elements of narcissism is, that's why it will take several episodes, one of the key elements is a constant, insatiable need for validation. And needing validation, right, it's not a binary thing, by the way, not like, some people need it, some people don't. Everyone needs to be positively mirrored by others to some degree, right? It's part of how we form our sense of self as children and retain it as adults. But in terms of the psychological patterns of narcissism, this need is insatiable, right? So if validation was alcohol, for example, most of us would probably be casual drinkers. Others might binge quite a bit on the weekend. And narcissism, well, that would be the full-blown wake up in your own excrement kind of alcoholism. And in a book called The Culture of Narcissism by Christopher Lasch, Lasch argues that capitalist societies breed a deep hunger for validation. I mean, look at social media, that's all about, how many likes did I get? I used to have a friend who would ring me up when I was living in Poland. She would ring me up from London and go, oh God, no one's liked my post. Can you please like my post? She was not a narcissist, but she was quite narcissistic. This insatiable need to validate, please like my post. But I should point out, Lasch isn't talking about individual pathology here. He is all about what society and its systems reward. And in capitalism, that's rewarding performance, visibility, image. And narcissism in this context, it's less of a flaw for him and more of a rational adaptation to survive in a society built on constant comparison, eroded community and self-branding and all these other things. So it kind of comes back to Krishnamurti, where it's, it is no sign of one's sanity to be well adjusted to a sick society. And this is an example of that. To adjust to the sick society, in terms of what it rewards, we become more narcissistic. And this is not a sign of our sanity, is it? We're becoming less sane because of the insanity of the system. And yet, Lasch doesn't say that specifically. He's talking about the narcissism inherent in our system through breeding, encouraging, and kind of like facilitating that need for validation through the ways that we reward certain activities, certain performances, and so on. And he adds, with all of this going on, competition, comparison, and the rest, people are becoming just overly self-focused, image-conscious, and emotionally isolated. In a narcissistic culture, competition is thrilling, not just because of the prize, but because of the spectacle of winning. Being a winner feeds that need we talked about to see ourselves as superior or unique or even the best. And there's another interesting thinker on this one, Carol Dweck, and she talks about these things called fixed and growth mindsets, right? She's a psychologist. And even though she's not actually focusing on narcissism or competition, her theory of fixed mindset shows how people who think that ability is innate become obsessed with proving their worth. And that is people with the fixed mindset. They think that ability is innate, and it makes them hypersensitive to comparison and often just addicted to winning. Their identity is tied up with this, right? Their innate ability to do flower arranging. I don't know. So they're constantly intent on proving that because that is who they are. And for those people, competition can be enjoyable because their identities are tied into being naturally better than everyone else at flower arranging. And they need that external validation repeatedly, like on high rotate, acknowledging their superiority. And there are a ton more philosophers and psychologists who talk about why we like competition. And because this episode is going to be really long anyway, I'm going to kind of gloss over them, but their names will be at the end of the notes and YouTube. So if you want to read more about what they have to say, you can. So Herbert Marcuse, One Dimensional Man, is his book, suggests that in advanced capitalism, people are trained to enjoy their own domination. And being taught to like competition helps disguise our oppression as freedom. You're free to compete, right? And that, of course, keeps us from questioning the system itself. So, intriguing guy, Marcuse, read him. Then there's Byung-Chul Han in The Burnout Society. Now, this guy actually lectured at the town I live in, Karlsruhe in Germany. He lived here and lectured at the KIT. Don't ask me why, because that's a technical university. Anyway, in his book, The Burnout Society, Han argues that neoliberalism turns us into self-exploiters. So constantly competing with ourselves in the name of optimization. This is that whole, I just want to do my personal best thing, which he labels self-exploitation. And he says the reason we do this is because it gives us a sense of autonomy and achievement even as we burn out. And this is how society is designed to work, in his view, to give us just enough reward that we will keep going to the point of ruining ourselves in the process. And of course, one of my favorites, Slavoj Žižek. You've probably figured out by now that I cannot get through a single episode without mentioning Žižek. My dog is not named after him for nothing. And Žižek suggests that we enjoy ideologies even when they harm us. And in capitalism, competition isn't just a burden, it's something we are trained deliberately to love because it creates this, like I said, just add water identity and meaning in the absence of deeper social bonds. So here you are. This is a podcast on isolation, loneliness, in the absence of these bonds. And this is what society is like, according to these commenters too. We are being told to fill the hole with self-betterment, with measuring sticks that are not of our making, with competition and comparison. So, in summary, competition is appealing because it fulfills deep psychological and societal needs. From a psychological perspective, it helps individuals validate their self-worth by comparing themselves to others, as theorized by Adler and Festinger. In a capitalist society, as Lasch and Marcuse highlight, competition becomes tied to personal identity and social status, reinforcing narcissistic tendencies and masking underlying social inequalities. The drive to win or outperform others is amplified by a system that rewards individual achievement and creates a sense of autonomy and superiority when you do it. And, as Dweck's research on mindset shows, those with a fixed view of abilities find competition particularly motivating because it offers a tangible way to prove their inherent value. However, this obsession with success often comes at the cost of mental health, as noted by Han, who discusses how neoliberalism turns competition into a form of self-exploitation. Žižek also points out that our enjoyment of competition is often ideologically driven, serving the interests of capitalism while distracting from deeper societal issues. And now we get to the shadow side of competition. For those of you still asking what is wrong with being the best you can be, we've already looked at how the question itself makes the idea of competing, like being the best, seem benign. It detracts from any moral consequences in a similar way to sports metaphors. And we've also discussed the fact that definitions of best are set by forces external to us, by our culture and what it values. Now here, we're going to talk more about the element of striving and what we lose through it. Which brings us, of course, to that classic concept, survival of the fittest. So often used to justify the idea that competition is natural, it's what everyone does, it fuels progress, therefore let's do it. So we have to start by calling out the emperor's nakedness here. It's somewhat akin to last week's episode, where cognitive primacy turned out to be scientifically untenable. Yeah, our ideas of competition, that it fuels progress and ensures fairness, is also built on shaky ground. The phrase, survival of the fittest, wasn't Darwin's. It was coined by Herbert Spencer, a 19th century social theorist, whose reading of Darwin made you question if he could actually read at all. Darwin himself, right, especially in The Descent of Man, he emphasized sympathy, cooperation, and mutual aid as being the things essential to our survival. Spencer, on the other hand, morphed Darwin's work into a justification for capitalism, colonialism, and hierarchy. It was Spencer who pushed the brutal arena version of life, where each individual has to be the best or die. And that interpretation stuck. It became the mantra of a system that rewards domination and calls it excellence. Now, some people obviously knew enough about what Darwin was really on about to rail at Spencer's claims. Peter Kropotkin pushed us to remember that cooperation, not competition, is what's central to survival. Others, like Stephen Jay Gould and Daniel Dennett, echoed this view, reminding us that the every man for himself worldview is not even science, it's ideology. And even so, the myth lives on. It saturates our workplaces, our schools, relationships, and our sense of who we are and what we're worth. It teaches us to measure our value by comparison instead of connection. You've got to ask who benefits from this worldview, because it's not us. There's a cost for all of the stuff that looks nice on paper, and we're going to get to that now. Cost number one. Now this is pretty pertinent to isolation and loneliness. Competition undermines trust. Not just trust in terms of emotional closeness, but the basic feeling of psychological safety around others. When we're busy prizing comparison, trust becomes risky. We learn to see others not as companions in our shared uncertainty, but as potential rivals, people whose success could eclipse our own. The logic is simple and based on the idea of scarcity. If there's not enough success to go around, then your gain is going to be my loss, right? If I want that success and you stand to take it from me, it will change how I interact with you entirely. I might withhold or avoid you or become really wary or strategic or even start disliking you when I wouldn't otherwise. And when this kind of behavior becomes habit, a friendship can occur, it becomes transactional. How can you help me get better at this thing? What do I stand to gain from being a friend with you? What do I stand to lose? Now, I want to tell a story because I'm going to use it as an example for a couple of things. It's from my music days. So I used to play in a lot of those, scenarios where there's many bands on in one night, or it's a festival, so there's lots of bands around. So, it's very rare as a musician that, you're the only one on the bill. It happens, but it's rare. But I noticed this pattern, and essentially there were two kinds of vibe that you would experience. Now, I'll start with a crap one, right? There were certain bands and performers who treated each other and everyone as if we were all in competition, right? And they were kind of cold and closed off and just sort of miserable to be around, to be honest. You'd say hello and you just get, and, there's no camaraderie, just this unspoken tension. And you wouldn't dare to ask to borrow bits of gear or, they wouldn't dare to ask you. And it was kind of like, a competition for what, right? Because keep in mind, when these things go on, the order is already decided. You can't win being the headline band because that's already been chosen. So, it was just uncool. And the other scenario is, of course, the bands that did not buy into that mindset and, saw other musicians and performers as peers and not threats. And those were fun, of course, and open and supportive and, banter, collaboration, you'd share your gear, you'd talk till 3 o'clock in the morning, and it felt like community and connection. Yet more and more, we just keep seeing these, they were around when I was a teenager too, but it's been pumped up, these battle of the bands things, and Eurovision, and ranking one musical act against another. And we encourage competition in that arena so much that it is filtered down to scenes like mine that should want nothing to do with that sort of commercial bullshit. Because I'm going to ask you a question, right? Write down in the comments if you have ever experienced this. Have you ever met a music fan who only listens to one band? Like someone who buys one album, or the albums of one band, and refuses to ever enjoy another artist again because they've already picked out the best. Do you know anyone like that? I don't. I don't think they exist. It's fucking absurd. And, to add to that, we don't have less love per band when, let's say, we like 5 bands. It hasn't, diluted the enjoyment that we have for one. And yet, competition is foisted upon us. And really, it just makes doing shows with people who've internalized that whole maximize your success and be the best, it's fucking tedious and no fun. And what the story's about is an even deeper mechanism that lies behind how competition and comparison alienate us from one another. This is about how we ourselves internalize the competitive gaze. Those bands who saw all of it as competition, well, that is an example of what's to follow. If we keep comparing ourselves to others, we start to realize or assume that others may be doing the same thing to us. So if we're judging ourselves against impossible yardsticks, we can also assume that everyone else is judging us and themselves against impossible yardsticks too. So that assumption, right, that we're all always being measured, creates this kind of ambient self-consciousness, a sense of being on display, like watched by judging eyes. And this brings me to a super fascinating idea of Sartre's. And he called it the look, but it's a foundational aspect of a lot of other stuff that built on it, and came to be known in a broader sense as the gaze. And because of my accent, G-A-Z-E is what I mean, like the look, the gaze. And before we get to Sartre, I'm going to jump back quickly to Foucault, who I mentioned last episode. As a quick recap, Panopticon is a circular prison. There's a watcher in the middle. The inmates who are around the circumference know how the watcher wants them to behave, and they don't want to be punished, but they can't see when the watcher is there. So they do something that Foucault calls internalizing the watcher. These inmates, they police themselves as the watcher would want them to. They don't know if the watcher's there, so they end up taking on this role themselves. It's like they've got a little watcher inside their head telling them how to act. They police themselves. And this is called internalizing the watcher, or internalizing the gaze. Like having that little watcher in your head, gaze, monitoring you, judging you, assessing you. So Sartre takes this idea and he hones in on how people want to be seen by others, i.e. as great, successful, worthy, unique, the best, and so on. We want others to judge us favourably in order to feel better about ourselves. And in a society that values competition, this results in a world where we are, or feel that we are, constantly evaluating and comparing others to ourselves, and that they are doing the same thing to us. And this is even if they're not doing the same thing to us, we still think that they are. Sartre points out that the moment we are seen by these comparing, judging others, it changes how we act. We begin to perform ourselves. That version of you with a smile that you use for selfies, and the confidence you learn to fake from some book claiming to know what your target gender finds attractive. That version of you that nods and tries to look like they understand absolutely everything that could be linked in any way to the area of expertise you wrote down on your LinkedIn profile. We perform ourselves rather than just being ourselves. And in a way, we're like the main character in a film that we imagine others are watching. We're trying to be admirable, desirable, competent, according to what we think they value. These others, this audience, this becomes internalized too. It's like, what do I imagine? It's like the watcher with Foucault, right? What do I imagine the watcher wants me to do and not do? I will do that. I will make sure I police myself to do that so I don't get in trouble. With Sartre, this is more we have internalized an entire audience of people. How are they going to see me? How are they going to evaluate me? I imagine that they want me to look or be or behave like this. So I will police myself to behave in that fashion so that I get some kind of positive assessment. So we're constantly adjusting ourselves based on where we believe we stand in the imagined eyes of others. And in the very famous Being and Nothingness, Sartre talks about how we tend to define ourselves through what others think of us, or how we think they think of us. And we're not just managing impressions in our performance of ourselves, we're managing survival in a system where being behind or less than feels like being unsafe. The thing is, when we are constantly performing instead of being, it undermines our very sense of self. We come full circle to what Dweck, Lash, and others discuss. When we lack a sense of self, it feels awful, right? And when we don't know who we are, we seek reflections and validation from others in order to try and find out who we are. We hunt out those yardsticks, those judgments of good at X or the best at Y. So what this boils down to is the idea of competition and the constant comparison. We end up internalizing what we think the opinions of others will be about us on the yardsticks that society has defined. We police ourselves, we edit ourselves, and we lose contact with the people we really are. And this horribly lonely way of being just forces us to seek the same drug, to go out and go, okay, well, I'm not sure who I am anymore. I need to know, how do I measure up? Measure me, please. And it should be pretty clear that this is not conducive to flourishing. Gabor Maté, he's one of my favourite authors on connection in the modern world. He shows how chronic performance in survival mode specifically makes connection feel dangerous. In other words, he shows how it erodes trust. If we're always being watched, real or imagined, we'll never risk being real. Maté's work shows how survival-based living, where success feels scarce and failure feels fatal, closes the door on emotional intimacy. We can't afford to be vulnerable if we're in constant competition. And we wonder why we feel so lonely. Wonder no more, friends. Yet another inbuilt reason why we are. And you might be wondering, are there any alternatives? Well, we've talked about what Darwin and his supporters recommend. There is also Martha Nussbaum, and she suggests something quite the opposite of competition is what fosters human flourishing. She has something called the capabilities approach, and it suggests that human flourishing is not contingent on dominance or comparison. Instead, it's on nurtured vulnerability, empathy, and interdependence. Does that sound a bit more like what Darwin originally said, or what Maté says over and over, or many people have been saying? Yes. However, for Nussbaum, all the stuff, so nurturing, empathy, interdependence, they have to take place in the context of safety. It makes sense, right? Because imagine if you've just had a baby and there's lions prowling around, you're going to be kind of crap at mothering if you're running about all over the place. So safety is required for nurturing, for example. Or if you've just had a baby and you're in some group where every member of your tribe is trying to kill each other to prove they are the strongest, nurturing is not going to work either, right? So safety is vital, but very hard to come by when competition underpins everything we do. When we are forced to perform strength at all times, where is the space for vulnerability? We're kept in battle mode, we're kept time poor and constantly scared of failure or loss or being pushed out to the sidelines. Those pending assessments, exams, performance reviews, all of it keeps us hooked on measuring up, and all of it keeps our focus on external definitions of good enough. There is no space for what Nussbaum, Darwin, and the rest of them suggest leads to human flourishing. And Foucault might add, that's no accident. And as I've mentioned Foucault again, I'm going to elaborate a bit on the thing with the panopticon and self-surveillance, because some of this is about who benefits, some of this is about power. And it's kind of one of the most insidious effects of competition in terms of what it does inside us, right? So, over time, we're not just comparing ourselves to others. We have internalized this hypercritical voice that measures us against impossible ideals. And we've developed this inner audience like Sartre talks about. So this kind of internalized gaze that is constantly asking us, are you winning? Are you enough yet? And another of Foucault's ideas, the disciplinary society, shows how power becomes most efficient when it turns inwards. We become self-surveilling machines, regulating our own behavior, appearance, productivity, and even emotions to stay competitive. We treat ourselves like projects to optimize rather than people to nurture. This feeds right into not questioning the system. This feeds right into the kind of soft power where we think we're free to do whatever we want because we've actually internalized the forces that want us to behave a certain way. They're not out there holding guns. They're in our own head doing it to us for free with no external force required. And all of the self-alienation, obviously it is not harmless, right? It chips away at self-compassion. It creates anxiety, shame, and disconnection. And because competition never lets us rest, there's no pause button. There's no space to fall apart or ask for help or to simply exist without having to prove anything. It's a treadmill, like with no off switch. And the longer we're on it, the further we drift from who we are. Now, I want to move to something that's tied in with this. As I always say at the beginning of the podcast, none of these values stand alone, right? They're inherently intertwined with other ones. And of course, there will be some of you sitting there going, oh, I don't have this issue with the internalized audience holding up measuring sticks and telling me that I suck. I feel fine with this whole competition thing. So let's look at something. I'm terming this section, Success and the Individual, a hero narrative in the making. And this is all about how competition and the hero narrative can go hand in hand, particularly for those who feel like they're doing well under this system. Because where there is success, there is almost always a personal story, like a mythic arc. And in the Western tradition, especially under capitalism, that arc is structured around the lone hero, the one who triumphs against the odds, who rises through talent or grit or divine uniqueness. And if you can narrate your life as a rise to success, then you've successfully become the protagonist of your own epic. You've made it. How many stories are we sold like this in the music industry? All those people that grew up in trailer parks and then somehow made it because of their spectacular talent and became a hero because of their success. And here's the catch. If you are the hero, everyone else becomes part of your story. That means people are no longer like complex autonomous beings with stories of their own. They're either obstacles to overcome or side characters like in supporting roles who are either there to help you advance your success, your cause, or to be pushed aside. This is the instrumentalization of other people baked into the logic of heroic competition. You are the one who must rise, and if others are struggling, that just confirms your superiority. Even spiritual frameworks that claim to rise above ego often reproduce this. Ever notice how some folks on a healing journey turn other people's shit behavior into lessons meant for their own growth? And none of them are just dealing with an asshole. They've been gifted a Yoda, someone who's there to teach them something. So that co-worker who undercut you, they're there to test your ego. And the ex who ghosted you, a divine teacher in disguise. This isn't deep enlightenment. This is just another kind of self-centered myth-making. It's another kind of hero narrative. It is also, underneath the flowy linen and compulsory good vibes, very narcissistic. Because think about it. If all these people were sent to teach you something, then clearly some benevolent cosmic force is tracking your progress, like a personal trainer with a clipboard. It's still a success narrative, just with more echinacea and toxic positivity. It's spirituality as main character syndrome. The world revolves around your personal growth. Everyone else, props, triggers, plot devices. This is narcissism, like maybe in soft focus with a sprinkle of healing crystals on it, but nonetheless, complete solipsistic self-obsession. And like all myths under capitalism, it becomes performative. As long as you can craft the right story, complete with hardship, breakthrough, redemption, whatever, then it doesn't even matter if you feel fulfilled. You look like you've won. And that's important. Philosopher Alain de Botton names this directly Success isn't about living a meaningful life anymore. It's about looking enviable, about appearing to win the game, even if it's slowly killing you inside, which again leads inevitably to alienation. So you get it, right? If you're doing poorly at this, you've got these horrible voices, and the audience that's judging you as being not enough. If you're doing well at it, it still becomes performative and thus hollow. Eric Fromm actually warned us of this decades ago. He said that societies that overvalue achievement and individual triumph, and this is like even when the achievement is enlightenment or some spiritual but not religious thing, it creates people that are anxious and disconnected and lonely. You become a stranger to your own needs, and your worth becomes tethered to applause. Gabor Maté comes in here again. He takes it a step further. And he says, in a world where we're all pretending to be fine, there's no room to say, I'm struggling too. And so we don't. We curate, we perform, and we break down alone. And all the things that would foster connection, our failures, our grief, our humanity, that stuff gets labelled as weakness, as unworthy, and as a threat to our hero story. And in that hero story, no one else really matters anyway, unless they're helping you win. Speaking of winning, someone's got to, right? Let's talk about who the real winners are. And let's not kid ourselves. Competition didn't just randomly become the water we swim in. It's been installed, fed, and normalised for a reason. And that reason isn't because it helps you live your best life, as we've just spent quite some amount of time talking about. The real winners of a competition-saturated culture aren't the people who burn out trying to be enough. They're the ones who profit from our self-doubt, our constant striving, our quiet shame. Capitalist systems thrive when we're isolated, overworking, and obsessed with improvement, because isolated people buy more. Lonely people are easier to manipulate. The disillusioned look for gurus who claim to have answers. Anxious people work harder for less. All of them question themselves instead of the system. And the obsession with measuring? That serves institutions, schools, healthcare, corporations, dating apps, social media platforms. All of them function by sorting and ranking us. They need us to compete so that they can extract value, productivity or attention or money or obedience. The more we internalize their standards, the less we ask where they came from or who they serve. And it's not just economic. Social hierarchies, racism, patriarchy, classism, all of that stuff flourishes. If we're too busy competing with each other, we're less likely to organize together. If we see the person next to us as a rival and not a comrade, we're not going to tear down the structure that keeps both of us in place. In short, divide and conquer still works, and competition, especially when it's framed as just human nature, does a damn good job of keeping us divided. So when we ask who benefits, the answer is those already holding the power, those who've convinced us that our value must be earned through struggle, those who sell us the idea that if we just work a little harder, smile a little more, outperform our peers, then we personally will be safe, loved, seen. And let's not forget, it doesn't matter what happens to all the other people because this is my hero narrative. And whether these people are selling us a promotion, a soulmate, or a higher self, the message is actually the same. Keep striving, keep comparing, keep buying. And the idea that competition enhances our lives, it's a lie, but it's profitable. So let's put this all together. At first glance, competition looks harmless, even healthy and natural. We're told it motivates us, drives innovation, and helps us be our best selves. Wrapped in sports metaphors and self-help language, it has been sold to us as fair, natural, and even fun. But dig a little deeper and the story starts to crack. Competition, it turns out, is not just a personal quirk or motivational tool, it's a system, one that's embedded into how we work, how we relate, how we live, and it's doing damage. We talked about the fact that what gets measured as success is defined by the culture we live in, and that culture often values profit, productivity, looks, status, whilst missing out on other valuable things. So when we compete, we're not striving towards some universal truth of excellence. We're climbing ladders someone else built, often without asking who they were built for or who was left at the bottom. We also talked about why competition can be appealing for some people. It offers clarity, validation, and the illusion of control. It lets us feel like we're winning at something, even if we're losing ourselves in the process. From Adler to Festinger to Lasch, Dweck and Zizek, we explored how comparison becomes identity, how competition becomes ideology, and how the ego's craving for reassurance keeps us stuck chasing the next gold star. We touched on how systems teach us to love our own domination, how we become self-policing, brand managing, burnout-prone little productivity bots, quietly eroding our mental health and connection to others. We also saw what competition costs us. It erodes trust, it turns friends into rivals, it teaches us to see others as measuring sticks rather than mirrors. Through Sartre's gaze and Foucault's panopticon, we looked at how the system gets inside our heads, how we become actors in our own lives, performing instead of being. And through the lens of Maté, Nussbaum and Fromm, we saw how this performance isolates us, how connection requires safety, and how safety requires trust, and how competition quietly erodes both. We dug into the hero narrative too, that seductive, self-centering myth that tells us success makes us the protagonist and everyone else a side character, and spirituality isn't immune. When everything becomes a lesson sent to make you grow, everyone else becomes your teacher, your trigger, your tool. It's still about winning, but with incense. And it's still just as narcissistic as your standard capitalist hero narrative. And finally, we asked, who benefits from all this? And the answer, as usual, is not you or me. The real winners are those who profit from our disconnection, from our self-doubt, from our relentless drive to prove that we matter. Institutions and ideologies thrive when we compete and conform, when we rank ourselves, and when we try to earn belonging instead of just claiming it. So yeah, this isn't just about hustle culture or bad vibes on LinkedIn. It's about a system that keeps us apart, exhausted, and unsure of our worth. And the only way out isn't to be the best. It's to stop playing the game. And because of that, this episode contains an extra section. What can we do without having to win first? I'm going to start this section with a quote. Now, I don't know where this quote is from. I found it in a translation of the I Ching. So if you know, please tell me who said the following thing. I think it's a kind of a famous one. The forest would be silent if only the best birds sang. And I find that a really beautiful quote, because really when I was thinking about it too, it's like, I don't even notice who are the best birds. When I go into the forest, I'm certainly not thinking, what is the best bird song? I bet you don't either. I bet nobody does. And really, in terms of how we experience the world, we don't want one bird to shut up because it's self-conscious and only the best one to be there. This is how people are too. I don't want everyone to vanish who is not the best runner, or everyone to vanish who is not the best philosophical conversation in the room. Everyone needs to be there for it to be a forest at all. And really, that's all just a lead into the stuff I'm going to say about what we can do without having to win. And really, it is about choosing connection over comparison. It's kind of that simple, doing that wherever we can. It doesn't mean opting out of ambition and achievement, if those are things that are important in your life. It means questioning the yardsticks we use to measure that achievement with. Where are they coming from? Are they yours? It also means noticing when we're doing that whole comparison thing and doing our best to stop it. And instead, trying to see others as the human beings that they are. It doesn't matter if they're the best runner or the tallest or the prettiest or whatever. We can't dismantle structural systems alone, but we can chip away at their grip by practicing things like solidarity, refusing to perform perfection, and reaching for mutual care over individual branding, for example. Gabor Maté reminds us that regulation, like emotional safety, it comes through co-regulation, through being with others. We need each other. We heal in relation and not in isolation. And all of those being the best at X, Y, or Z things are things we do on our own. It will not heal your sense of isolation to know that you are the best at thing A, B, or C. It also means remembering that success is not a moral condition. You don't have to win at life to deserve rest or love or friendship or meaning. The idea that we do is a lie, and one we've inherited from systems that profit from our isolation. You don't have to be exceptional. You just have to be a human being like the rest of us. But here are some ideas, anyway, for actual small acts of resistance against competitive culture. Number one, share something imperfect, like on purpose. A song, a sketch, a voice memo, it doesn't matter. Just don't polish it and don't caption it with, I know this isn't great, or any of those sort of excusey things. Just share it. Let it be enough. Let it be part of the forest. I'm going to be putting this out when the lighting is terrible. I don't know if you guys have noticed. The lighting's terrible. I'm refusing to care, officially refusing to care. And do you guys care that the lighting is terrible, that this is not perfect? Bet you don't really. I bet you'd rather actually have it than not have it because I'm all worried about the lighting. Number two, compliment someone but without comparison. And even notice if you give compliments using comparisons. Don't say things like, oh, I've heard this one a lot of times from often quite self-obsessed gaslighty characters. They will often say, oh, you are so much more understanding than my ex. Yeah, red flag. That is a comparison compliment. So don't do that. Just do compliments like, I really like this thing about you, for example. Number three, ask for help. This one is about connectedness, struggling, and admitting that we can't be the best at everything. Choose one small thing that you could ask for help or support with this week. And also notice if like shame or resistance comes up. And if it does, do it anyway and let yourself be helped. Helping each other is what fosters connection. Number four, celebrate a failure. We talk about celebrating our successes. Celebrate a failure because it means you're human, right? It means you're not walking around there trying to be an AI. Thank God. Celebrate a failure loudly and kindly and deliberately. That's something that didn't work, something that you totally messed up. Celebrate it for what it is. Proof that you are not a machine, not an algorithm, and just a person learning as they go. And share it with someone who can laugh and stay kind at the same time. And let it be a reminder that we're all allowed to fail and still be deeply worthy of connection. I'm going to do this one for you, right? I met this person at a science fiction convention who actually liked my music, and he came up to me and he said, oh, Jordan, I really like your music, but that album, The Loneliest of Creatures, what the fuck were you thinking? It was by far my worst album. And it's like, I've always known that, but he said it out loud. And I just realized, yeah, everyone has to have a worst album, right? Every musician has to have a worst album. Whatever it is that you do, you have to have a worst of it somewhere. And you have to celebrate that. And whatever it is that you do, right? There's going to be some project or day or product that you really cocked up. And good. Your boss ain't going to celebrate that, but you can celebrate that because you're not an AI, you're not a machine. Thank God for that. And number five, this is the last one. This is about connection too. Reach out to someone who might feel left behind. And I don't mean to inspire them or fix them or even mention the fact that you can see that they're feeling behind, just so they know that their being behindness doesn't matter. It doesn't render them any less valuable as a character. You will have friends that are really... I have a friend actually, she totally struggles at work all of the time. I don't think any less of her. She's a beautiful character. She's just kind of shit at her job, right? I can be shit at my job too. So do that. Just let those people know that you care, because who knows? They may be constantly berating themselves for the fact that they suck at their job and thinking that it means that they suck as a person, when it doesn't. So those are my ideas. You might have more ideas, right? Because these are off the top of my head. If you have ideas as to how we can subtly get out the competitive mindset, then write them in the comments too. I'd really appreciate it. And with that is all the content for this week. What we have left is housekeeping stuff. Now, I want to let you guys know that I'm going to be doing these episodes every 2 weeks because I don't really want to go into the full story. It's a hell of a lot of work, which I do love doing. But my health is not the best, and I've noticed that I've been pushing myself to do this because I really love it, but my health is not keeping up. So I have to pace myself and make things sustainable. It's an issue I've faced for a number of years now. But just so you know, yeah, it's going to be every 2 weeks instead of every week. Hopefully that's okay with you guys. I'm really, really enjoying having these discussions online with you. I'm also going to be setting up a Patreon page. I will let you know on the YouTube community posts thing and on social media when that happens, because part of what I'm going to offer is a monthly Q&A for certain levels of support where you can come along and ask for more info on any of these questions, have discussions. Another thing I'm going to be offering is a philosophical discussion group once a month. And there's going to be a secret one. I will let you guys know when it's all available. But in the meantime, please do share the podcast with people that you think might enjoy it, whether that's on YouTube or on Spotify or another podcast provider. It really helps me to get the word out if you guys share it to people who would find it useful and relevant to them. So thank you for listening, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time.